Imagine the police getting involved, which you thought was a bad thing for the Prime Minister, but then it turns out it's a good thing for the Prime Minister because actually it postpones the publication of a report which is meant to be very damning of the Prime Minister.
Perhaps there was a little coordination behind the scenes.
Do you think
there.
Cressida Dick's been
bit
told...
Of PR magic sprinkled?
I mean, can you imagine the phone call from Downing Street to Cressida Dick's office? Right, here's what you're going to do. You're going to make an investigation, otherwise this report's coming out tomorrow and we can't have that. So if you don't make the investigation, we're going to replace you because, your time's up.
Maybe. Now, right, the thing about this Partygate, which I am as sick of as you,
yes,
it matters and it doesn't matter. You know what I think it is? I think it's a Scotch egg of a news story. So do you remember all the kind of...
I see what you did there.
Yeah, do you like that?
I did like that.
All the Byzantine, cruel, ridiculous lockdown rules that we had.
Yes.
I mean, some of them were just plain stupid.
Right.
Some of them were cruel and awful. And then there was the Scotch egg. Is a Scotch egg a substantial meal? And people loved it. They delighted over this story. There was all this gleeful discussion about whether... Because something about it kind of like tickles the English eccentric fancy.
Right.
And it's a way of poking fun at stupid things. Well, in a way, Partygate's become this. It's become this enormous distraction for the real issues. So
and it's not we keep saying it's not the wine or the cheese or the cake. It's not about the party or the swing that got broken. It's about the fact that they were doing all the things that they told us we couldn't do. That's the story, isn't it?
So thought one is hypocrisy bad.
Yes.
Don't like hypocrisy.
No.
British like fair play.
They do.
Okay. Thought two is punish them, baying for blood.
Yes.
And there's lots of journalists who are most definitely in this stage. A little bit of hypocrisy there, maybe, Kay Burley, Beth Rigby, anybody.
Yes.
Right? Thought
Give
three.
us a hug.
Yeah. Thought at a birthday party,
Yes.
even better. Thought three is, hang on. Wasn't it terribly dangerous? Oh, were they not scared to be at parties? Okay. Thought four is, all that fearmongering, the punitive fines, which they haven't had yet for Downing Street parties, but lots of other people did. The scary modelling, the ads, the daily death dashboard.
They're still doing the ads, right? I heard one the other day.
Was the risk not actually equally applied to all of us? Yes, welcome, come, join us. No,
Yes.
it wasn't.
No.
Okay. Then the next thought should be, okay, sure, do your baying for blood bit. But the next thought should be, what else is happening right now, which is totally unfair, so that we can jump off this carousel. Let's not be doing this again in another 6 months or a year. And that's going to be vaccine mandates. So all the journalists baying for blood over Partygate, yes, it was wrong. Let's let that chuntle on in the background. But what else is going on right now that's unfair? So the journalists who are obsessing over this Scotch egg of a story, are they talking about all the actual blood that was spilt because of lockdowns? Because literally millions of people have been hungry or starved because of lockdowns.
Didn't have birthday parties, didn't have weddings, funerals, didn't see people because they weren't allowed to, quite simply.
There was suffering in this country, but more than that, in the global south, millions of people went hungry. So if you're a street vendor, social distancing doesn't work. Your business is based on proximity. If you are a farmer in the global south, you have to drive your goods to markets, or again, they go to waste and you starve. Lockdown was always the most insane middle class luxury imaginable. So millions of people have truly suffered, but our sights are just focused on a birthday party and some birthday cake. This is very much a let them have cake type story. Can we talk about what else has happened? What's really wrong is the insanity of the lockdown rules and the suffering they caused. And I truly think that a lot of this kind of laser focus on the hypocrisy of the party is about avoiding the fact that people weren't looking at the right, they weren't looking at the right issues till now.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, watching what some people who were greatly in favour of lockdowns are now kind of moving more towards what we've been saying for a very long time, that perhaps we shouldn't ever do it again. Perhaps it was wrong. Perhaps it wasn't the right way to deal with the virus. And maybe all those people who said it was wrong were actually right. And that's how it turns out. And it seems to me that the investigation into what they did will have to encompass what they did in Downing Street and how they behaved, because that's relevant now. I appreciate what you're saying, and I know that it's petty and it seems to an awful lot of people to be ridiculous, but it's actually, in the scheme of things, part of the narrative.
Of course it is.
Because if they didn't believe it, then how dangerous was it? And if it wasn't that dangerous, why were they telling us that it was deadly? We know that all the people that died were by and large over 82 and suffering from some other comorbidity. By and large, I know that there were other people that died as well, but by and large, that was the number of people who died in a mass event. And the fact remains that most people who went into hospital came out and are okay.
Yeah. So it does matter, you're right, but the way I'd rather see this go is not so much some retrospective punishment for that, but instead every fine that was applied for people who broke the rules and socialised, scrap them. Why should students have had to pay thousands of pounds of fine for having parties or throwing snowballs? Yes, the literal story that
having an extra person in the house.
And I mean, also, I read, you've got to be so careful when you talk about suicide because it's not single cause. But I read a heartbreaking story today about a student at university who, during the lockdowns, killed himself. He had some other mental health problems, but it looks as though the isolation of lockdowns at university was too much. People literally have died and they've suffered.
And it's a massive contributing factor if you're already in a vulnerable state, if you are already thinking those kinds of thoughts and you're then locked in a place where you can't get out and see anyone, of course it's going to matter to you.
The problem is that fear and outrage fuel clickbait headlines, and journalists are still guilty of the same things they were guilty of before. When they were baying for more rules, they helped fuel this whole situation. And now they're baying for blood. There seems to be this human tendency to have to scapegoat people. And I know Boris Johnson's the right person in this case because he was the leader ultimately responsible. But this shouldn't be the big story right now. There are so many other things to look at.
But without getting past this story,
it runs through all of it like a stick of rock.
But that's the point. But without getting past this point, and the only reason we're not past this point is because of him, right? He refused to budge. He said, wait for the report to be published. Now, whether by manoeuvring or by happenstance, it's not going to be published for weeks, right? Now, that gives him weeks, if that's the case, to sit there and go, well, I can't do anything until the report's published.
Yeah, well,
which will be the mantra.
If I thought there was anyone better to replace him, maybe I'd be in more of a rush to see this happen.
See, I don't think that's an important factor because people say that a lot. I mean, that's the reason Cressida Dick's still there, because they can't think of anyone else to give the job to. And that's not a good thing because her tenure at the Metropolitan Police has been hopeless. Absolutely. She hasn't got anything right at all. He is in the same boat now because he is holed below the waterline. Look at what he's concentrating on. He's only concentrating on self-defence and basically protecting his own job. So when we say there are many important things that should be dealt with, like we just had Sir Gerald Howarth on there, who said all the things that I say. We've got a migrant problem to fix. We've got this green agenda to do away with. We've got a tax rise coming which shouldn't be coming. We've got all manner of things that he could be fixing. Now, of course, we've got the ludicrous situation where your nudge people have moved on to climate change and air quality and cycling because we've now got Chris Boardman, a former professional cyclist, being hired as the first sort of some kind of, I can't remember what the title is, but he's Commissioner for Sustainable Travel or something like that.
Yeah.
And the idea is to get everybody out of their cars and onto bikes or walking. Well, I'm sorry, you can't do that.
I know. Oh, you've moved me into the cycle lane before I was ready to finish.
Well, you don't have to move in there yet. Grr. You can come back.
Well, okay, I want to just say one more thing about the hypocrisy that runs through this like a stick of rock. Yes, it's important, but because we're obsessing about Partygate, we're still not talking about this vaccine mandate for NHS workers. The World Health Organization and government leaders around the world all say this really weird, creepy, patently untrue thing. They say no one is safe until everyone is safe. There is this obsession to vaccinate everybody. Well, do you know what they need in the global south? They don't need these vaccines, really. For a start, they're barely elderly and obese enough to have the same requirement that we do here in the Western world. But what they needed was not to be locked down. You can't apply the same types of safety and risk all across the world. It doesn't work. There's just so much bigger fish to fry than this party at the moment. All right, I'll stop there.
There is.
It's a bit like,
it's like the argument that they have about, or they used to have in the Democratic Party about right-wing sort of Christian Republicans who didn't believe in abortion because they thought you should have the child, let it grow up, and then give it the death penalty later on. It's the same kind of thing, isn't it? Where you say, all very well vaccinating people, but if their lives are going to be cut short by some other form of horrendous kind of illness or poverty or whatever, what's the point of vaccinating them against COVID?
Well, literally starvation because they've been in lockdown, waiting for vaccines.
Yeah.
It's madness.
It is madness.
So, this kind of nudging us into being perfect model citizens all the time and doing what our technocratic overlords tell us runs straight through into the cycling.
Yeah.
thing.
And when you say perfect citizens, in their eyes, not anybody else's eyes,
yeah,
right? Because who can afford a bike that costs £10,000? My dog, as I've said many times, can't cycle. Okay, so when I take him to the beach, he has to go in the car with me because I can't. I don't know whether you can teach a dog to ride a bike, but he can't. So he comes with me in the car.
Well, I'd love to teach my dog not to deliberately throw herself kamikaze style underneath bicycles. But you see, I think, Mike, you've completely misunderstood the point. Bless you. You bless your poor little cotton socks. Do you think in the future that they've got planned for you that you have a dog? Oh, it's so quaint.
Are they going to stop pets?
They're not. No,
not allowed pets.
I mean, you need to read up a bit more deeply on what these climate obsessed worrywarts have got planned for you. I mean, ideally, you'll be living in a smart city.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, there'll probably be some kind of like traffic light system that tells you if you're allowed out or not. Probably based on things like virions in the air, and I don't know if you've been good enough. Let's see what social credit rating is.
You've been out twice this week already. So
I know I'm being very
out.
fantastical about this, but yes, you'll be cycling everywhere because you'll be in a city. You won't need to travel very far.
Right.
I mean, Boris Johnson said something at the Conservative Party conference a couple of years ago where he said, the plan is we'll all be living in our communities and that'll make us happier. And I thought, hang on, I actually really like travelling.
Yeah.
And
he's talked about unleashing a great sort of nation of cyclists.
I didn't even know we were a nation of cyclists.
Well, we're not.
I'm not.
I thought we were a nation of shopkeepers. That's what Napoleon said. I'm happy with that.
Not post high street attacks and lockdowns, really. But actually, there is, in all honesty, the people who want to reduce man-made climate change don't really like pets because they eat meat.
Yes.
And that's, they don't even want us eating meat,
I mean,
Mike.
it sounds ridiculous, but I think, I remember, was there not somebody that came out and said that your dog actually has a bigger carbon footprint than a Toyota Land Cruiser?
Yeah, so...
just the other day.
There was a carbon... One of the government ministers, I can't remember which one, I think a junior one, said, if you must have a dog, perhaps you should go vegan, take the hit for your dog because they've got to eat dog food. So anyway, in this future you describe, yes, you'll be on your bike and you won't have a dog. Oh, well, quaint imaginings.
I guess I won't be going very far, will I? I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, I keep saying to them, why don't you concentrate on improving the bus lanes and the bus availability to people outside of cities, where in many parts of the country, I get people calling me all the time, you can't get a bus after 5 p.m, so you can't actually go and do a job of work that takes you into the evening because you can't get home. There's no underground service, there's no train service, there's no ability to even get a taxi in lots of parts of the country. So you have to have a car, and it's very expensive to run a car. The road tax is expensive. The parking's hard to do and very expensive. You're paying congestion charging if you're going to a city. The fuel's expensive, and so all of it costs money. So the people driving cars are driving them because they have to.
Yeah.
Not as a result of them wanting to.
Of course, it's like a pincer movement. They give you all the kind of the good stuff, like, oh, cycle, it's great for the environment, it's great for health, and putting some cycle lanes. And then they give you the bad stuff, which is making cars expensive, making it difficult to drive around. And now this new highway code rule has, I mean, this has unleashed waves of anxiety and fury, and kind of rightfully so. Now, I think I saw a cyclist already doing this the other day. They moved into the middle and were by the central line.
Yeah.
I just thought, what are they doing?
Oh.
Excuse me.
Right.
And there's like this whole queue of us behind. You can't get past them. What are they doing? This isn't even safe.
Well, what they do in London, you know how they've
lucky for them, they have me behind them.
They've got this box now, every set of traffic lights, where the cyclists are supposed to go in front of you because they're allowed to go before you. But the problem is they go so slowly, and they're all around you. They're no longer just in front of the car. They're all around. And then there's mopeds, there's bicycles, there's electric bikes, there's scooters, and you're kind of sitting there penned in by these people. And if you move the car an inch, you're going to hit somebody. And it's ridiculous. And they've allowed this to happen. And now they've said, oh, well, the thing is, cycle lanes are all very well. We've spent hundreds of millions on them, but actually the cyclists don't always want to cycle in them. So they're going to come back to the bit of road that you're left with so that they can take that up as well. And you're going, sorry, this doesn't sound right or fair or even normal. Sounds mad.
Well, I mean, it might work in some communities and some roads, but we can't bring cars down to the speed and to the level of bicycles. No. They're different vehicles, and maybe they need different lanes. But what I don't think is going to be safe or wise is putting bicycles right in the car lane,
Right.
in the middle of the road, it's going to cause anger, it's going to cause road rage, it's going to cause accidents. Some cyclists aren't the safest and the most sensible.
No.
I'm always seeing cyclists who aren't wearing high vis and aren't wearing lights,
Yeah.
especially
And no
young,
helmets,
especially
quite a lot
young
of them.
men, because
Right.
that's like, it's not cool to wear all that safety stuff. And
It's a
I
very
actually
male
worry...
pursuit as well. You don't see very many women cycling.
No, that's true actually, but you know why? That's because we like to look after our hair, and sometimes
Yes.
dresses don't work very well.
Right.
I'm going to come across as really old-fashioned and
I
slightly
don't think
sexist
there's
saying
anything,
that,
I don't
aren't
think there's
I?
anything old-fashioned
But
about that.
I use a bicycle
I mean, if you'd
for some
cycled in
things.
today, right, you wouldn't look like you do, would you?
From Surrey.
Yeah, from
No.
Surrey. You'd probably had set off at 5 a.m, covered in soot, probably from the traffic lights systems, and you know your hair'd be all over the place, and you'd be wearing some kind of lycra top.
I'd arrived bloody freezing in
Yeah.
a really bad mood with
Right.
my hair all over the place,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't have worn heels.
No.
And like you say, set off at 5 a.m. I'm simply not going to cycle everywhere.
No.
I didn't know we're a nation of cyclists. Let's see what these highway code rules unleash. But I don't think it's a nation of cyclists. I think it's going to be a spew of road rage. Regrettably, awfully, probably some accidents. And the thing is, you know what? Cars are good. I'm just going to say this.
Yeah.
Cars are good. I really like my car.
So do I.
Cars have opened up the world.
Yeah.
They've opened up the world. I can do my shopping easily. I can travel to see people. I've been able to work.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had many jobs where I wouldn't have been able to
And let's
take
face
the
it, for
job
many
without
women,
the car.
for many women, it isn't safe to go out on your own in public transport. You know, it's nice to have your own car where you can feel safe, where you can get from point A to point B under your own control. You know, why would you want to take that away from people?
Well, also when I've been driving around my children, my shopping and my dog, it's an awful lot easier than putting them all on a bike. I mean, it would have been great for my leg muscles, but just not possible. I like cars, don't we all?
I love them. I like my car. I'm not giving it up. I'm not cycling. Thank you very much indeed. We're here with Laura Dodsworth. We'll be back very shortly here at the Independent Republic of Mike Gray. Remember that?
No, we have lovely, healthy debates.
We do.
would never row. Anyway, you know, it's the stuff of life.
Of course.
We can't agree on everything.
I mean, this is a great actual example of how confusing the world has become because of the fact that James Well is a bit of a pro-vaccination time lord, and he goes on about people quite rudely sometimes, and I would not endorse him doing it. I wouldn't ask him to do it, and I wouldn't agree with him doing it. But because they agree with him, what he said about Boris Johnson, people are confused because they don't want to like him because of his views on vaccination. But now they agree with him on something else. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's a couple of things going on here. I mean, purity politics is so tiresome,
Isn't it?
People, I shared something that a politician said on Twitter recently, and someone came back and saying, "Oh, you shouldn't share him because of this, this, and this." And I don't care what he's thought in the past about a different issue. I liked what he said about this. The idea that you must research somebody's CV exhaustively to know whether you may endorse one thing they've said or
Peter
not.
Hitchens is very good on this because he very much supports the case of Julian Assange. He doesn't like, and makes it very clear. He says, "I don't like the guy. However, I stand with him in his quest for not being extradited to the United States of America to stand trial on what is basically a thought crime." You know, and he's very good at being able to separate the person from the thought. And I think so are you. And I'd like to think so am I. But a lot of people can't.
People have to grow up
Yeah.
and they have to have courage in their convictions and be prepared to say what they know is right.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean you have to approve of everything that someone's ever said or done and everything about them. But the other thing feeding into that is also that while we're incredibly polarised and there's a lot of conflict on social media, I mean, social media has been a crucible for conflict.
Yeah.
We're also very averse to conflict. I mean, look at the trends in AI. So AI can now finish writing your sentence for you on LinkedIn or in email. I once did an experiment, Mike. I set up another account so I could talk to myself through my email using only AI to see what would happen.
The ultimate onanistic practice.
It's the kind of mad little artistic experiment I'll indulge in. It was too boring to ever release. But now it's also being...
Did you ask yourself any questions you couldn't answer?
No, I let the AI do the whole conversation.
Really? Wow.
Oh, anyway, it's much more interesting when I'm involved.
Yeah.
Oh, both of us, we
Yeah.
don't need AI. But also what AI does now is predict emotion and tries to tamper down conflict.
Right.
It's a little bit pathetic.
That's
People just need
ridiculous, isn't
they just need to get a bit more comfortable
It's
with being
like
able to
Twitter
disagree.
now.
It doesn't have to be scary.
If you use a particular word which they provide as some kind of a derogatory word, they come up with, "Are you sure you want to tweet this?" Have you seen that?
Yeah.
And you're going, "Yeah, that's why I wrote it."
Yeah, in general, there's there's a kind of general move to protect us from everything, while at the same time, the environment's never been, that online environment's never been less safe in a way. There are so many bad actors, so much control, so much censorship. I think that is less safe than...
And the nudge units are hard at work, of course.
Nudge units, thank you.
Yes.
There was something else I want to talk to you about today, actually. Because
well, we're right out of time, but so you have to be quick. Look at the time; it's 11:30.
Maybe I'll save it for next week.
Should you?
Yeah, I think
because
so.
I don't want to go too early and not be able to get to the whole part that you want to get to.
Yeah.
We'll save it for next week then.
We'll save it for next week. There's always something, isn't there?
Tantalising.